we actually don't have a lot of evidence that shows that that GMO foods are bad for our health, and that's a statement. I say that as a researcher, but there have been times in public health where I could have said the same thing about some things that are bad, right? So that's just a factual statement that we haven't seen a lot of evidence of that. The place where it's some of the GMO systems that I have some concern over are the ones where you've sort of married a variety of a crop with the use of pesticides, so the Roundup Ready model. And so some of the use of those pesticides in those systems, we haven't necessarily deemed all the pesticides used in those systems as healthy for the environment or healthy for us. But there isn't a body of evidence that shows that GMOs have been unhealthy for us.
Take it one step further and say I just came back from the Nobel Prize, and 170 Nobel laureates signed a petition saying that there are no adverse human health effects based on genetic modification. You'll also hear that from Walter Willett, who's a colleague in this department that is 20 years and 30 years on the subject, but it's much more complicated than that. So as you spoke about, obviously the resistance to pesticides, we're dumping pesticides because we have plants that can withstand them. That is a bad thing. The intellectual property of the GMO is also a bad thing. I want to know more about them, but I can't because it's protected from me. So when you're hiding someone from something like that from people, of course they're going to distrust you. But you have to take it to a nuanced level and say there's cisgenic and there's transgenic. And see, this is already where you lose most people. But everything you've ever eaten was GMO. Everything. We've been selecting for traits for 15,000 years. Corn does not look like it looks today because of natural methods. Farming is not natural. If it was, plants would line up in rows and they would be all the things that we wish to eat and they would support society. So we need a better conversation on what natural means.
About a third of the world's land area is covered in a land type that is unsuitable in production terms for anything other than livestock production. There have been some terrible experiments with trying to convert these lands into croplands, and they've been environmentally disastrous. And so, within the context of this discussion about food security, taking a third of the land area out of production, maybe we want to think about that. And maybe can we do things smarter? I think a lot of people think that we can, and I think a lot of ranchers are moving toward that as well. There are mixed systems that have both crops and livestock, and so you feed the crops to the livestock and you use the manure to fertilize the crops. When grain prices are very low, you can sell the animal products. When grain prices are high, you can sell the crops directly, and that helps to even out livelihoods around the world, which contributes to food access, which is a central tenet of food security. So I just like to broaden the discussion a little bit.
Calestis.
Yeah, I think this idea of feeding the world is really a 20th century idea. It seems to me today that the focus is on nourishing the world. And if you start to think about it that way, the focus shifts to nutrition. And when the focus shifts to nutrition, you start to find out that the range of crops, many of which are traditional and indigenous, available to communities worldwide, significantly expands. Historically, what we've tended to do is to select for yield, not for nutritional content. And that narrowed down basically to having the bulk of our calorific intake coming from a very small number of crops. And so I would say that the way to really frame this is around nutrition, and that expands the base, and that base is largely crop-oriented. And might not necessarily, I don't want to offend people who think that if you remove beef from their diet, that will be the end of the world. But I think it offers more opportunities for getting protein without having to force people to give up some of their lifestyles. So it's really an issue of framing. So I would say for the 21st century, we really should be talking about nourishing the world, not necessarily feeding the world.